The festive mood was set. The king laughed and enjoyed the celebration. The tide of the war had tipped in their favor due to aid from an external source. Everything was perfect. The nobles brought their best wines to celebrate. But in the barracks, something was starting to happen that would start to shake the world. Brought in by his fellow guards, the venom spreading rapidly. The palace doctor came in and saw him on the table, the symptoms already showing, the sweating, the heavy breathing. "What bit him?" he asked. The two other guards looked at each other and then back at the doctor. "We don't know. What he said makes no sense." 8 legs, Harry. They tried to repeat what their fellow guards said. It made little sense, however. Soon they had to strap him down on the table as he was starting to randomly thrash about. He kept mumbling to himself. Finally, the doctor, even with all his wisdom, gave up. He had not seen such a potent venom before and had no idea how to treat it. He would first have to extract the venom and then study it. Time he simply did not have. This was an important threat. The doctor had no choice but to report this to the king. If a strange creature made its way into the palace, it could become serious. Stepping into the great hall, the sound of laughter and cheers filled the air along with the strong scent of booze. The doctor quietly made his way over to the king and leaned over to report on the matter. The king just sighed. A mere guard could easily be replaced. But just as the doctor wanted to step away from the king, the side door burst open. Everyone turned to look at the guard that came stumbling in. Black liquid dripped from his nose and eyes. The other guards readied their spears and surrounded him with shields. He turned to the king and laughed. The doctor could not believe his eyes. This man should barely be able to move. His eyes locked with the king. Words came from his mouth like a speaker for someone else. Food and drink. A man that forced himself onto a throne by stepping on others and think himself a god. Little did he realize he was simply sitting on a little step, a mere pebble in the way of the true Lord. The king stood up. Those words sunk deep. He lifted his arm to give the order to strike this man down. But as the guards readied their spears to pierce him, the guard fell to his knees with the last words. "The Spider Queen has awoken. Arania the Arachne is coming." He fell forward, hitting the stone floor with a thud. A breath left his body as the black blood pooled under him. The king quickly ordered the guards to remove him, but the old scribe was the only one that realized just how serious this was. He stood up and kneeled before the king, begging him to flee. The nobles looked at him as the guards dragged the body away. The old scrolls spoke of the Spider Queen, a monster above all monsters. "If she is real, my lord, we must ready our knights." The king demanded him to be quiet. The whole mood of the feast was spoiled. He was furious. His own men embarrassed him in front of nobles. The door suddenly burst open, and a monster slowly came walking in. It towered above the knights double their size. A bulbous black body, 8 powerful legs. It seemed like they were made of a type of black metal. Where the head would be, it was instead linked with a human-like body. A woman's torso, pale skin, long black hair and those red eyes, her fangs sharp and her claws black and long. She looked around at the nobles who all backed up against the wall. No one dared to move a muscle. The knights charged at her, but in a mere instant she cut through them with her legs that seemed to be sharp like blades. She stood before the king as he cowered on the ground. She reached down and picked up the scepter. With ease she broke the scepter and removed the metal orb that was on the crown. She held it tightly in her hand and leaned over the king. "Your goddess has abandoned you, human. Soon he will arrive. There is no turning back now." She simply threw the base of the scepter to one side, which was made of pure gold, and left through the door. Small black spiders followed behind her, coming out from everywhere. Chaos erupted in the royal city, but the Spider Queen was long gone already. Throughout the mainland, Quests were spreading to be on the lookout for a monster. A sketch and detailed description with a life-changing reward of 100 gold coins, enough to set anyone up for a wealthy life for many years. Hunters gathered, and even the bandits smiled at the quest. Never before has there been a bounty with a reward so large. But far to the south, there was an attack on a caravan. The 4 armored guards defeated. The merchant ran away with his pouch of coins, leaving everything else behind. Arya had little interest in the caravan. It was the food that she was after. She sat on a crate eating some of the dried meat and sipping on the wine. She heard movement on the back. She pulled the cover off a cage and saw a girl sitting with chains binding her hands to the bars. The girl looked at the monstrous being in front of her. She just lowered her head, accepting her fate. Arya reached into the cage and lifted her head gently by pushing her chin up. An elf, beautiful and gentle, once powerful that my lord favored, but broken on the inside both heart and below the waist. How low you have fallen. The elf's eyes just leaned away without a single word, her shaking legs squeezing tightly against each other. Arya forced her head a little to the side to meet her eyes once more. You will do perfectly for the ritual. She took hold of the cage door. With ease, she pulled the cage open, breaking the iron lock. She broke the chains as well and held her hand out to the elf as if she was royalty. You serve me from now on, elf. My father will reward you greatly for your assistance in his revival. The elf just lowered her head. As you wish, master. She gave her food to eat to regain her strength and packed a bag for her to carry. Arya decided to take on her human form, which made the elf feel a little more at ease. It was strange. Arya had come to realize something. A small black spider came crawling up her body and rested in the palm of her hand. She held it out to the elf and asked her what she saw. The elf looked at the little critter, about the size of her hand, black and covered in hair. I have no knowledge of such a little creature, master. Forgive my lack of knowledge. She sighed. Everyone knew what a spider was. The little spider crawled up to her shoulder. Together, the two of them left the caravan heading south. In the meantime, the king was furious. The old scribe was working hard researching the old library with his students. The more they found, the heavier his heart became. One of his students even asked if what they were finding was real. Arania, queen of spiders, said to have nearly taken over the world once before. Even a supposed elder dragon that lived long ago wanted nothing to do with her. The old scribe sat back in his chair. I believe the end times might be upon us. The Spider Queen will destroy this world. He gave the information to the king. One side, the princess stood behind a pillar overhearing everything. She clenched her fist against her chest, her hand shaking. Her older brother stood with her father. He slammed his fist on the table, demanding the army to chase down this monster and bring him her head. The king silenced the young man. He reminded them that they were still in a war against the dwarves and the beast folk. He sat back looking at the information before him. He was just about to reveal his plan when the queen took the princess by the hand. She pulled her away, scolding her not to listen in on her father. She took her to her room and pushed her inside. She reminded her that she had to practice her manners. Soon, she would marry a noble to strengthen the royal family. She slammed her door shut and even locked it. The princess sat on her bed. She pulled the letter the noble had written to her from under her pillow. Not even her father had seen the contents. The vile things that were written in there made her feel sick. Outside, the knight gripped her spear tightly as she guarded her door. She was one of the few who knew how imprisoned the princess was. 2 days later, an attack happened. Screams filled the streets and flames reached into the night sky. The princess could only stand and look at her locked door, her heart racing. She had tried to call out several times to find out what was happening. There was no reply. By midnight, the screams had faded. Her door burst open, and a bloodied knight came in. She took her by the hand and led her to the window. She helped her get out when one of the attackers came in. The princess saw him, the gray skin, the black horns. The knight quickly drew her sword and cut him down after a fierce struggle. She was clearly exhausted and wounded, but still, she helped the princess. They walked on the ridge, outside the palace, overlooking the burning city. They reached a small cliff and started to climb all the way down to the crashing waves below. The princess cried. She was overwhelmed by a mixture of fear and pain. She felt a hand grabbing her by the waist and pulled her to a small boat. It was a slave that served in the palace. The knight got into the boat also and nodded for him as she took the princess in her arms and held her tightly. The princess covered her ears and closed her eyes. It all happened too fast. By morning they reached the shore of the mainland. The knight gave the slave a small key to his shackles and a pouch of coin. She nodded to him as he freed himself. He ran off into the bushes as she looked out over the waters at the smoke balling into the air. She looked at the princess, bare feet and still in her night dress. She quickly stripped herself of her armor and cast them into the bushes, the cuts she suffered in battle painfully visible. She took the princess's hand and walked into the bushes as well. For days Arya and her companion traveled by foot through the mountains to the east. Powerful monsters nested there, and even drakes were spotted. Even though fearful of the path they walked, the slave simply kept her head low and followed. Her companion, this monster lady, rarely spoke. She was driven somewhere she had not mentioned anything about. Nighttime's monsters circled a small campfire, but never dared to attack. As the end of the second week approached, the slave sat by a small campfire alone. It was late afternoon. The air in the mountains felt a little thin. She just sat there watching the afternoon sky. She was snuggled up against a small cliff with an overhang. Even if it rained, she would remain dry. She had no choice but to wait as Arya had stepped out to meet with a dwarf. Not too far from her, Arya smiled. Her fingers slowly pulled back as her venom-coated sharp claw pulled out of the dwarf's neck. Caught in the act, the perfect subject, slaughtered humans captured as prisoners of war. They killed them as they recently lost a battle. It was pointless to keep them as prisoners still. But before they did, a few of the dwarves had a curious taste. The dwarf slowly pulled his pants up as the human lady just fell over to the side, barely alive. Arya turned around and left as the venom started to spread in the dwarf. He left the camp, making his way back to the main city with a little spider snug under his clothes. A powerful drake landed suddenly before the slave. It saw her as it flew over, looking for an easy meal. It leaned forward as she just pushed herself up against the wall. The only thing she wished for was to have a quick death at least. The powerful beast leaned forward, its head moving closer, even crushing the overhang a little. Rocks fell to the floor as it slowly reached for her with its claw. A small black spider hopped from the wall onto its snout. The drake focused on the little spider and moved back. It suddenly held still, not moving a single muscle. A voice broke the sudden silence, the drake slightly leaning its head to the side. Arya stood there calmly. "The human is my property. Leave at once while I still allow it." The small spider jumped off. The drake saw this chance and took a stance, its wings up to make it look bigger, its head low and a deep growl. Out of nowhere, a huge talon suddenly crushed the drake into the ground and kept it there. The slave looked up as a wave of fear struck her. A dragon in all its might stood there, dark green scales, horns proudly standing up with a wave of hair down the rift of his neck, teeth sharp and glare strong. If one word could be used to describe this beast, power. A deep rumbling voice echoed through the air as it started talking with Arya. "Arya, it has been a long time." Arya stood her ground. "Yes, after you and the others sealed me." The dragon started to glow and suddenly morphed into a human form. Long, gray hair, strong muscular body, and a robe covering him with a tail hanging from under the coat. The drake stumbled away from them and quickly flew off. We had no choice. You and that abomination you called father was a threat to our goddess. Arya smirked. The goddess that has abandoned this world. Funny how that works. He did not respond to that. She took a step closer. It will be pointless to fight now, Drak. You know you are not the top deity anymore. She slowly started to morph into her arachne form. He just let out a sigh. I have no interest in fighting you, Arya, but I must know. Are you planning on reviving him? Arya smiled. I am merely trying to be a good daughter. He looked down at the dirt under his feet for a moment. Then he looked back at her as he slowly started to morph into his dragon form. I will never accept an abomination like that as a god. If he wants war, that is what I will give him. I still have my pride. Arya just clicked her tongue as he flapped his giant powerful wings and flew away. Arya returned to her human form and came over to the slave. She gently placed her hand on her head and smiled. You have nothing to worry about. No beast shall dare to harm you while under my name. That night, once more the dwarven city under the mountain got invaded by a monster. It attacked no one and went straight for the throne. Instead of a drunk party, she found a lone dwarf sitting on his throne. He was an old dwarf, but still very strong. It was said the hammer he wielded could not be lifted by humans. Two armored guards dragged a body out to the middle of the floor and just dropped him. Black blood oozed from his nose and eyes. The dwarven king stood up, lifting his hammer with one hand and resting it on his shoulder. Arya was calm. She cared little about fighting anyone. She only came for the orb that was at the base of the hammer's handle. The old king wasted no time. He slammed his hammer on the ground and charged the monster before him without a shred of fear. Not even an hour later, the old king sat upright. His hammer stuck up high on the ceiling with webbing, a long cut on his left arm, and the metal orb gone. The guard's captain helped up. He brushed his beard gently with his hand, wanting to know if they should send the Iron Army after her. The old king just grunted as he walked over to his throne. He gulped down whiskey from the bottle and threw it one side, crashing on the floor. He lifted his hand and gave one order: lock the dwarven territory down. No outsiders are allowed in at all. He knew about the Arachne Queen and what she was capable of, and wanted nothing to do with it. The war against humanity and the beast folk. It suddenly became completely pointless. Heading south, Arya and the elf reached the last sign of civilization, a small town in a gentle forest, used as a resting point between two bigger towns. Trade caravans and travelers often stopped resting there. They walked into town, and Arya's attention got drawn to the old, abandoned mansion on the hill at the back of the town. A slight memory came to her when she was still young. An older man stopped close to them, noticing what she was looking at. That old place is a curse, young lady. Best not go there. She looked down at him, seeing him smile. If you want to rest, I suggest the old tavern down the main road. Good folk there. She returned his warm smile. Thank you, kind sir. I was just looking at the different material that was used. He looked up at the structure. Indeed, said to have been built with dungeon blocks. He shook his head a little. Dungeon walls cannot even be mined. Makes you wonder what fool made that up. Arya just kept her smile as the old man walked away, reminding her to go to the tavern for room and good food. That night Arya sat on the chair looking out the window. The room was nothing fancy. A single bed, table, and two chairs with a tub in the corner. The young elf was sleeping. She had a good meal and washed as well. The tavern owner gave them a strange look when she requested a room with one bed, trying not to judge by still judging. Arya just shrugged it off. These people had no idea what her goal was. This town was the one place she should have been the most respected. But given how much time had passed, she could not blame any of them. It had been about 500 years already after all. The next day the elf just watched as Arya stood on a crate looking over the people that had gathered. Their mayor stood in his night garments clutching a bag of coin that belonged to the town. An old, fat fool, she called him. Everyone was shocked, for their poor mayor to be treated like that, dragged out into the street from his own home. The few guards that stood in the town had no choice but to drop their weapons as she held a blade to the mayor's neck. "This is your one chance, mayor. Confess to your people." He gripped the bag tighter, refusing to say a word while looking for help from the crowd. A man from the crowd called out to her to let him go, claimed him to be a good man that did not deserve this. Arya just watched as one by one they started to stand against her to defend their mayor, but it was expected. She swept the blade down, suddenly cutting the bag. Gold and silver coins started falling onto the floor. She pointed the blade at two young slaves nearby with swollen bellies. "A good man," she called out in frustration. She threw down the blade into the floor so hard only the back tip of the handle could be seen. Having fun with young girls just because he is a mayor, and now the girls are pregnant and set to be sold soon. She looked at the elf and nodded. The elf walked forward and held her hand up with a scroll rolling open, revealing it all. To be purchased by someone named Vander, their age and conditions, as well as their estimated expecting date. Those in the front row spread the word to the back. They looked up at the mayor that seemed annoyed by their reaction. Arya held on tightly to his collar. "I came to speak with your mayor in good faith to work with him, but this." She pushed him forward, causing him to fall off the crate into the mud. "I cannot work with a pig." She got off the crate and stood over him. "Your sweet mayor was about to take your town's coin and run away after I confronted him. None of you knew of the girls he had locked up like dogs." Her eyes met the woman. "This could have been your daughters, and you would have defended him still." They looked at each other in shame. She kicked him over, seeing him still gripping on the bag of coin, trying to stop the bag from spilling more coin. "Take your precious coin and run, pig. You are no longer fit to be called a human and lead people. This is no longer your personal paradise." He stood up and glared at her. "You will regret this. You cannot simply come in and take over a town as you please. I am the mayor and this town belongs to me." He nudged his way through the crowd while walking backwards. "I will return, you will see, all of you." Everyone just watched as he turned and ran out of the town. Arya just let out a sigh. It was just as she said. She came to him in good faith to ask for his assistance with her plans. But when her little spider scout found the girls she knew, this man was no good fit for this town. She pointed at two of the young men standing there. She ordered them to go to the mayor's house and lock it. She looked at two guards and told them to guard that house at all cost. One of the guards asked her why they should listen to her. Arya stepped towards him and picked up his sword. She handed it to him and looked him right in the eyes. "This is your chance. Remove my head or pierce my heart and it will all be over." He looked at her as everyone watched. His hand gripped his sword tightly. Her eyes showed no fear. He felt more like he was looking at a predator waiting to pounce at any moment and take his life. He stepped back and nodded. "We will do as you command, my lady." He and another guard quickly went towards the mayor's house. Arya turned and looked at the people. "From this day onward, this town belongs to me. If anyone wish to stand against me, I shall grant them a chance to leave peacefully." The tavern was suddenly closed as she sat on a chair in the middle of the room. This was all happening quicker than she thought, but she refused to work under a pig who did such things. Somewhere else in a different town, Laura and the young Princess Lynn sat by a table in the corner. They had just finished a meal. Laura was on high alert most of the time, even if she had to take steps to disguise the princess. Her hair was cut shorter and dressed in normal robes. To the outside, they were just a simple mother and daughter, not knowing she was the royal princess and a knight captain. Word had already reached this town as well. The royal island was no more. Most of the royals had managed to escape to the main continent known as the Wasteland. The royal family, however, was no more. The king and queen murdered, the prince missing and presumed dead, and the princess said to have been taken by a noble. Many were secretly jealous. The princess was a young, beautiful lady that was kept locked away. Many nobles wanted her for her beauty. She could only keep her head lowered as the rumors spread amongst the people. Just who was so lucky to kidnap the princess? What fun she must be! Sickening words that reminded her of the words in that letter her planned husband had written. Laura wanted to keep moving. The further they got away from the royal island and nobles, the better. She was one of the few who knew how greedy the nobles were. They paid and got back on the road. The princess rarely spoke as she had no choice but to trust her. They kept heading south. They learned that there were smaller towns spread out to the south where the empire did not have influence, a lawless place where bandits ruled. Laura came up with the idea to protect the princess. What better place to hide than amongst enemies? Back in the small town, Arya looked at the people that gathered at the gate. She nodded, seeing how uneasy they were. They had just lost their mayor and the town's coin. Now their new self-proclaimed leader is setting off into the dark forest. We shall return soon. Do not forget that this town is mine now. I will not simply let go of what belongs to me. The people just looked around at the small, crawling critters. Arya made it clear they were there to keep a lookout while she was away. They had never seen such creatures and thus feared them. They set out into the dark forest just behind the town. The young elf was starting to get nervous, as it was clear she was to be part of some ritual. For most of the day, they walked until they reached the perfect spot. Huge trees covering out the sunlight, unknown beasts roaming about. There they set up camp, a small campfire going and some bread with meat. The elf just watched as Arya morphed back to her arachne form. She crawled up the giant trees with ease. She spun down to long strings of webbing from a branch up high, and attached the two metal orbs at the end of each of them. Below them she cleared a small area of all the leaves and branches. She returned to her human form and sat down by the fire when she noticed the elf's hands were shaking. It was not a cold night out, and she was dressed up warm by the fire. She let out a little smile. "You have nothing to fear, elf. My father won't kill the one that helped bring him back. You are safe." The elf simply nodded her head. "Understood, my lady." But her hands were still shaking. Arya knew there was nothing more she could say. She understood the elf was in a strange situation. The next morning it was time. Arya in her full arachne form made sure everything was set. The elf stood still watching her, but could not help herself. She lowered her head and begged Arya to forgive her, but she wanted to know the truth. "My lady, I cannot help but think about it. Are you about to summon the Dark Lord?" Arya stopped and looked at her. "The Dark Lord, what is that?" The elf kept her head low. "It was said that one day the Dark Lord would come to our world and bring an end to everything." She placed her hand gently on her head. "I don't know about this Dark Lord you speak of, but I am simply undoing a wrong that was done a long time ago. I have honestly no idea what to do from here onward, but I am undoubtedly sure my father knows." The elf nodded. Arya placed her hand under her chin and gently lifted her head. "All you must do is help me bring him back. Your blood is all I need." She gently lifted her right hand and gently cut her palm with her sharp nail. Then she took the other hand and did the same thing. Blood dripped from her palms as Arya stepped aside. You just must coat the metal orbs with your blood, nothing more. The elf walked forward and smeared each of the metal orbs with her blood and stepped back. Arya smiled. She could barely contain her excitement. She took one of the metal orbs and pulled it towards a tree. A small black spider held it in place. Then she went over and pulled the other orb in the other direction. She looked at the elf girl and told her to take cover. The elf quickly hid behind a tree as Arya and the spider let go at the same time. The two orbs swung down and collided with each other and shattered into pieces. The blue spark from the two caused a tear in reality to open. Strong surges of energy surged from the rift. Arya stood her ground as the energy brought the elf to her knees. From the rift a foot appeared, then the leg and the body followed. A man stepped out of the rift wearing nothing but a ripped robe. His hair long and messy, and his beard thick. The rift closed behind him, and Arya slowly stepped closer. The elf looked up seeing this normal-looking man before her. Long black messy hair and a thick beard. Covering his body was a long ripped robe. Arya quickly kneeled before him. "Father, you have returned." A gentle breeze brushed through the forest. The elf kept herself hidden behind the tree. She felt nothing from this man, but she felt like her life would end the moment she moved. Arya lifted her head as he looked down at her. He held his hand out and she placed hers in his. "Arya, how long has it been?" Arya stood up proudly before him. 500 years, Pops. I was sealed as well and only woke recently." He looked up at the trees above him. The air was sweet as he took a deep breath. He looked back at her. "So it happened. The so-called goddess left." Arya nodded. "The crystal shattered. I believe that was the trigger to release me." Arya looked over at the tree where the elf was peeking from. She nodded for her to come closer. The elf slowly came from behind the tree with shaking hands. She came before him with a whimpering voice. "Your loyal slave is ready to serve, my lord." His eyebrow twitched a little. "You are free. Go live your life without shackles." The elf froze, her eyes locked on his feet. Arya gently took him by the arm. "Pops, I believe she was born into slavery. She does not understand. That is why I offer her to you. It was her blood that freed you." He gently lifted her head from under her chin. "So be it, young elf. Then let me ask you, will you serve me?" The elf nodded. "As you wish, my lord."